Okay, let's get right into it. Way out in the Alaskan wilderness, there's this huge field of antennas called HAARP. Now, the official story is that it's all for scientific research. But a book that came out back in the 90s called Angels Don't Play This HAARP tells a totally different and, frankly, a much more terrifying story. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the really extraordinary allegations made in that book.
And to really get a sense of just how serious the book's claims are, you only need to look at this quote it highlights from the Russian parliament. Back in 2002, they put out a formal warning that the US was creating a new kind of geophysical weapon. And what that means is a weapon that can actually manipulate the forces of the Earth itself. They claimed this was a jump as big and as dangerous as the move from regular bombs to the atomic bomb.
You know, a warning like that brings us right to the central question that drives the entire book and this explainer too. Behind all the fences and the official stories, what is the secret of HAARP?
So, following the book's trail, our investigation starts in Alaska, and it's here that two completely opposite stories just slam into each other. Is this some harmless research project, or is this something that could affect the entire planet?
I mean, the gap between these two versions of reality is just massive. On the one hand, you have the US government saying, hey, this is just a tool to study the upper atmosphere. But on the other hand, the book claims it's a weapon with unbelievable power. We're talking capabilities straight out of science fiction.
You know, these concerns didn't just pop up out of thin air. The book shows how a pretty surprising group of people, journalists, local activists, even an accountant who worked for the company building the thing, started raising red flags really early on. They all pointed to the secrecy, the sheer scale of it all, and basically said, something here just doesn't add up.
But, okay, let's say HAARP is what the book claims it is. You have to ask, right? Where on earth did this kind of technology even come from? Well, the authors trace its roots back more than 100 years, to one single, brilliant, and very controversial figure in the history of science. And that figure is Nikola Tesla. The book paints him as this misunderstood genius whose most radical ideas about harnessing the planet's own energy, were pushed aside, only to be secretly dug up and turned into weapons decades later. The book basically draws a straight line from Tesla's work right to HAARP. It all starts with his ideas for sending power wirelessly through the Earth. Then it moves to his later concepts for remote-controlled weapons, even a so-called death ray, all of which the authors claim are the building blocks for what HAARP would eventually become. Now, the secret ingredient to all of this, according to the book, is a principle called resonance. It uses a really simple analogy. Think about pushing a kid on a swing. You don't need one giant shove, right? You just give small, perfectly timed pushes, and they build and build until the swing goes really high. The authors claim HAARP does the exact same thing, using small targeted pulses of energy to get the ionosphere to react in a huge way.
So how did these ideas from, 100 years ago supposedly get turned into a modern military program? Well, the book connects the dots by jumping us forward to the peak of the Cold War.
Remember Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative from the 1980s? Well, according to the authors, it never actually went away. They say the funding just went into the shadows, and the research on directed energy weapons kept going under different names, eventually leading to projects just like HAARP.
Now, the real core of the book's evidence comes down to 12 specific patents, all filed by a physicist named Bernard Eastlund. And these patents describe some really radical ways to mess with the ionosphere. I mean, one is literally titled Method and Apparatus for Altering a Region in the Earth's Atmosphere, Ionosphere, and/or Magnetosphere. And another one even describes creating nuclear-sized explosions without radiation. The authors see these patents as the secret instruction manual for what HAARP can really do.
To really paint a picture of what could go wrong, the authors pull this really chilling passage from a novel. It describes what they call a planetary short circuit, basically a runaway reaction where trying to tap into the ionosphere's energy goes horribly, horribly wrong, with disastrous results for the entire planet.
And this slide? Well, it puts a number on that terrifying idea. The book warns that 1 trillion watt-seconds of energy could be unleashed. It's a number that's almost impossible to wrap your head around, an amount of power the authors claim could be accidentally triggered by messing with our upper atmosphere, a true planetary disaster. But believe it or not, the book's claims go even further beyond physics and into something even more disturbing, the direct manipulation of the human mind. And this is, hands down, the most controversial allegation of them all.
The theory, as the book lays it out, is that HAARP isn't just beaming out random radio waves. It's capable of sending signals in the extremely low frequency range. And it just so happens that's the same range our own brains operate in.
You see, our brains are constantly humming along at different frequencies depending on what we're doing. We have slow delta waves when we're in a deep sleep, and faster beta waves when we're feeling agitated or stressed out. The book's really frightening claim is that by sending out a signal that mimics these natural frequencies, you could directly influence how people think and feel. And here's how it's allegedly supposed to work, in a process the book calls brain entrainment. First, an external signal is broadcast. Second, your brain, because of that resonance principle, locks onto it. Third, this new brainwave pattern changes your brain chemistry. And finally, that altered chemistry affects your behavior. It's basically a blueprint for a silent, invisible form of psychological warfare.
So the book then takes all of these separate pieces, the weather modification, the earthquake potential, the mind control, and weaves them into one final, massive argument that HAARP isn't just one facility in the middle of nowhere.
Again, pointing to that same report from the Russian Duma, the book alleges that the Alaska site is just one piece of a three-part puzzle. Together with similar facilities in Greenland and Norway, they supposedly create a global network, a closed contour that can influence the planet on a massive scale.
And what could this whole system do? While the alleged list of capabilities is just staggering. The book claims it could do everything from knocking out satellites and power grids to triggering earthquakes, destroying the ozone layer, and even affecting the mental health of whole populations.
So in the end, the book argues that HAARP isn't just some new toy for the military. It frames it as the centerpiece of a revolution in military affairs, a whole new kind of war that goes beyond bombs and bullets to achieve complete control over the physical environment and the human mind itself. So, let's boil it all down. The big takeaway from Angels Don't Play This HAARP is pretty clear. It totally rejects the official story. Instead, it portrays the project as the end result of a century of secret research, a weapon with the power to control weather, geology, and maybe even our own consciousness. The book presents this world of secret patents, forgotten geniuses, and top-secret military projects. And when it's all said and done, it leaves you to grapple with one last, really big question. In an age with technology this powerful, who really owns the sky?